Podcast City Network.
This is Final Score, your number one podcast for sports news. Here are your hosts, Chris and Craig.
Hey everyone, this is Craig Campbell of Final Score on Podcast City Network. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I wanted to have another special episode tonight. Current guest that I have been a guest on previously, Gerald Glassford of the Lakers Fast Break podcast, is going to be joining us tonight. But before we get started, of course, got to do a little plugs, get that out of the way. Final Score is a proud member of Podcast City Network. Podcast City Network has 19 independent podcast members across all genres of podcasting. Find PCN on all major social media platforms, facebook.com/Podcast City Network, on Twitter @Podcast City Net, YouTube, search keyword Podcast City Network, and of course our website, podcastcity.net, and Final Score also on podcastcity.net/Final Score. For all the latest from Final Score, including this interview, be sure to like us on Facebook, give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. Finally, you can catch all audio versions of our podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Podcasts. Simply search keyword Final Score, one word. And with that, I want to bring in now our guest at this time, Gerald Glassford of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Gerald, welcome to the show.
Great to be on the program. Looking forward to a great basketball conversation coming up.
Absolutely. And of course, basketball right around the corner. We are less than a week away. I'm super excited for this season to get started. I know it's been a short off season, but I know you've got to be ready for it too.
Absolutely. Quite a quick turnaround. Seemed like just the other day when the Lakers won the world championship, and just seemed like, okay, we're into the draft. We're into trades. We're into free agency. We're into training camp. And we're ready to go with the next season.
Yeah, here we go. It's for the NBA fan. This is probably like the best happy medium. You get the championship, the NBA Finals, a very small off season, and then we get right back into it for the next season. Thankfully, it's a little bit of time for teams like the Lakers coming off a championship and get a little bit of time of R&R. But getting rid of all those, the summer camps and the summer league, getting rid of all those things does, probably going to hurt a little bit, I would think, as far as like rest and relaxation and the load management that's been a popular thing now. But glad to have the NBA back. Absolutely. But I want to touch a little bit about your podcast and kind of explain to our listeners. Of course, I've been a guest on your show. Always a lot of fun joining your show.
Absolutely.
Want to tell our fans a little bit about Lakers Fast Break podcast. What can you tell us about where to find it?
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to have the platform to go ahead and be able to give everybody a shout out and let everybody know about the Lakers Fast Break, the show that you've been on. And I'm hoping you'll get a chance to come on very soon, whenever you want to. The door's always open.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what, it is the Lakers Fast Break. Just type in Lakers Fast Break wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, doesn't matter. Just go ahead and type that in. It should come up. Lakers Fast Break, Apple Podcasts, of course. Basically touch on everything going on in the NBA. We do have a focus in on Lakers and what's going on with the inner workings of the team, their prospects going forward. And we do break down quite a bit with the Lakers, but we also bring in guests from all over the basketball realm, whether it's the NBA draft. We do quite a bit of coverage on that with awesome guests there. And of course, we bring on guests, not just Lakers-centric guests, but guests that have a great knowledge of the NBA. They share their sides on the Eastern Conference teams, Western Conference teams. They go ahead and bring their insight as well, their perspective, not only as non-Lakers fans, thinking and talking about what they feel about how the Lakers are going to go ahead and approach the season, but their teams as well. So we like to get that broad mix of fans and insights and analysis and just bring you that opinion there that I think everybody will enjoy. Plus, I do get the crew from Lakerholics.com on a regular basis as well that we go ahead and I guess argue. I guess also as well, maybe have some type of conversation as well. But there's always a fun conversation to be had when we talk about the inner workings of the Lakers. Some of our most spirited discussions lie there. But also, like I said, the NBA draft, the whole NBA, we bring it up to you each and every time out on the Lakers Fast Break podcast.
Absolutely. You guys have had a lot of great guests lately. Of course, you mentioned Lakerholics, guys breaking down every preseason game. It's been really fun to listen in and just kind of hear that back and forth, that spirited discussion, as you mentioned.
Well, that's what I want to do. I actually, our focus in our goal is trying to get post games done on every game. And then also as well, trying to go ahead and bring on other episodes outside of just after the game episodes to bring in a variety of guests such as yourself that can come in at your convenience and talk about the NBA as well.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun seeing the wide range of guests that you had. Some of the friends of our show as well joining. It's always a lot of fun to listen in on that. So that's at Lakers Fast Break. That's going to be on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow at Lakers Fast Break. And of course, like you said, anywhere you can find your podcast. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the past NBA season and kind of course, the cloud looming over the NBA's head in all of sports, really, COVID-19 and
Absolutely.
How that affected last year. Of course, we got most of the games. Now this year, we're going to have a slightly shortened season again. How do you think the NBA handled the bubble last year, and how do you think they're going to handle COVID this year?
It's so funny how you and I and a lot of other people were talking about it leading up to the bubble, and we had such great concerns about outbreaks and oh my gosh, such dangers, and we're sending people there to die in Orlando. And sure enough, it was one of the safest places on the planet to be on. And the way that the NBA conducted it was truly remarkable. And it's going to go down probably in history, along with what the NHL did, the WNBA, and all those other sports leagues that tried to follow suit with a bubble of their own. But the concept, the sheer concept, how they went about it, how they governed it, and how they approached to try and make sure and prevent as much as possible any type of outbreak was truly remarkable. I mean, all those tests that were done without a single positive result was just, I couldn't believe it. It was just awesome that the way they did that, they get true credit for it. But now comes the real task, because obviously the players did not want to go into another bubble. The league itself, just by sheer cost wise, did not want to do another bubble. But now we get into a situation where, okay, you don't have fans for the most part. You're going to now go ahead and play in your own arenas. You're going to be in your own homes. You're going to travel with your own selves. And now there's going to be a problem with it. They did expand the full active rosters to 15. I think they might need to add one or two more slots personally during the course of the season. I see that happening because there might be a situation where, these are kids, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then their early 20s, mid 20s. Oh my gosh. I mean, not all of them are going to go ahead and stay home or stay in the hotel room and play video games. So we're going to have a situation where there is going to be a team or two during the course of the season, or three or more, where there could be an outbreak. And that's what I'm truly concerned about at this time.
Yeah, and kind of the approach, I like a little bit of the approach they're taking with having the first half and second half. And I think that's probably something the NBA has always kind of wanted to gear towards the last couple of years anyway, but it's a great excuse to now utilize it. And having that first half, now they can kind of see, okay, in a couple months, where are we going to be as a country with COVID-19? We have vaccines that are starting to go out, but how is that going to affect everything? And, I think the NBA, I've said it before kind of on our show, is that the NBA has handled it the best of any professional league in North America. And now we're really going to see how they handle it. I think, like you mentioned, adding those extra roster spots, I think you're going to see a lot of those stories about guys from the G League making the jump, a la like maybe not to the level of like a Jeremy Lin from years past, but I would think a lot of stories like that are probably going to come up, especially on teams like the Lakers, that you've got guys, Anthony Davis and LeBron James, who they're going to be on load management. They're going to have some nights off from those back-to-backs. So you're going to have that supporting cast and maybe some of those younger guys come in and step up and play.
It's so funny that you mentioned Jeremy Lin, and he signed, I believe, a G League contract with the Golden State Warriors. So he'll be playing on that G League team. So funny how life circles itself back around from the G League to Linsanity to a veteran's career to a career in China to now possibly G League once again. And if, like you said, is true, and the odds are right now because of the way the vaccine is being distributed and who it needs to be prioritized to, it's going to be a situation where there could be a possibility of outbreaks. And if Golden State has an outbreak or 2-3 players off for extended period of time, who may they call up? None other than Jeremy Lin.
Absolutely. I'm really curious to see how the NBA does respond the first major outbreak.
Yeah.
You're like you said, there's going to be players here and there that do test positive, but it's when they have that first major outbreak, do they start canceling those games for the team? Is that where they use the break in between the first and second half of the season? I really am going to be intrigued to hear how that ends up playing out and what their plan is. I don't think the NBA is actually given too much detail on it, to my knowledge, about what they're going to do if a major outbreak occurs.
I think they're keeping it fluid, and I think that's a smart thing to do because they're gauging how everything is going to take place because there is so many unknown elements and so many things in play. So I like the fact that they are keeping it somewhat open. They're doing things on the fly. They are making changes. There are going to be teams like Utah who's going to be playing just because of logistics, a lot of more teams in East than some of the other West teams are. It's just they're keeping everything fluid. They're keeping an open mind about things. Obviously, they can't keep things rigid. They even have floated the possibility of a bubble for the playoff season again. So, these things that they're all doing is that they're just going ahead and approaching this in an open fashion, understanding that things might have to be on the fly because, like you said, all it takes is 1 or 2 outbreaks and the season could be in chaos. But I think they're trying to put every contingency in place and keep things open to make sure that if that does happen, they can make sure they can go ahead and keep a season still going because, the league's been hurting in a lot of ways, ratings wise, financially. They need to keep the season up and running to go ahead and keep things consistency, not only for the fans, but for the league in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a couple of those hotbed areas that are still kind of seeing some pretty high COVID numbers. I know Florida here is included in that. Having Toronto Raptors come down and play in the Tampa area is really going to be a big, kind of a big, interesting kind of linchpin point for that. Having them in Tampa and having 2 other NBA teams, if you have major outbreaks in Florida, you could now essentially affect a part of the entire conference. So definitely love how they've been keeping everything fluid, as you mentioned. And, NBA, like I said, they've handled it the best and they continue to do so. So definitely have all full confidence that Adam Silver and company are going to do what's best for the league and for the players.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. Again, they're keeping an open mind on everything. And although I'm sure they haven't covered every single contingency plan, I mean, there could be something that's thrown out of left field, to use a sports vernacular for them. Yeah. But I think they're more prepared than virtually any league because we've seen the problems already with the NFL, Major League Baseball. These leagues, when you handle it poorly, a lot of bad things happen.
Absolutely. But kind of shifting gears a little bit and now focusing a little bit about that short off season and the Lakers, in my opinion, outside of like the draft, which they didn't draft any players, but outside of that, like that off season have made a flurry of moves, trades and free agency, adding and subtracting players. What do you think about what the Lakers did in the off season?
It could go either way. I mean, a lot of great moves on the surface, on paper. I mean, you have issues last year of, who scores coming off the bench? Who goes and scores the points when LeBron is not in the game and it's just AD? They addressed that by getting the 6th man of the year and the runner-up to the 6th man of the year in Dennis Schroeder and also Zoe Montrezl Harrell. I mean, a lot of things that they covered there as far as size-wise. They had some issues with size because they let JaVale McGee and they let Dwight Howard go. So they figured they'd go ahead and cover that with Marc Gasol. I still have some minor things, nitpicks I would like to make with the roster and some questions I still have heading into the season. But on paper, I think they got better. On paper, I think they got overall a lot better for the regular season. So now that they do have a couple good scores there, they're able to go ahead and give more rest to AD and LeBron, which is paramount going into the playoffs because it is such a truncated and will possibly be a very quick season. So I'm very interested to see the development of Talen Horton-Tucker, who has captured Los Angeles Lakers fans by storm this exhibition season. Will be very interesting to see how much play he can get, how many minutes he will earn, and what he can do for the team going forward. And then, of course, Kyle Kuzma standing. He will most likely not get an extension before the beginning of the season. So how he fits into the rotation, how he fits for the team's decision making going forward, I think is also going to be something a lot of Laker fans are going forward. But the team itself, I don't want to be on the bandwagon because there's a lot of people saying, oh, by leaps and bounds. And here in Vegas, they're talking about how they're favorites. And obviously the numbers reflect that. I do think they're the favorites. I think you have to make them favorites. I think they've gotten better in a lot of ways. I'm always the uneasy guy. I'm always the realist when it comes to Lakers fans. And I try to look at everything in the way that an executive would, like, okay, this is great, but how can we do better?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the Lakers are great, but I'm always looking at ways for them to get better.
Absolutely. Of those new acquisitions, whether it be free agency or trade, which of those guys do you think could make the biggest impact kind of immediately? Because like we said at beginning of the season, you're probably going to see a lot of load management for some of those guys. And who do you think could make the biggest impact of those new acquisitions?
I'm going to say Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder. I will say he's the one that can make the biggest impact. Obviously, losing playoff Rondo. I'm not going to say Rajon Rondo because Rajon Rondo regular season, as you know, is not a pretty sight, but playoff Rondo is something else.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically was that player that stepped up in the playoffs that you have to have every year for a team. And having Dennis Schroeder there is someone who statistically is a lot better and more attractive than what you would see out of playoff Rondo is amazing. I would love to have him play that level, but it could work against you as well because he's fiery, he's very aggressive, and you'd be either the team loves him or LeBron will want to kill him. It's just that simple. But we'll see by the trading deadline. We'll know by the trade deadline if he's not jettisoned off somewhere else, and if he's a major part of the team going forward. That I would love to see because he's playing for a contract and the Lakers are playing for a championship. I just hope that those two ideals will mesh going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. When you get those things where championship or bust and a guy's in a contract year, usually he plays a little bit harder because he wants to get that.
He wants to start, and I'm not sure he's the best option to start. I'm sure he and Harrell have the chance to become another Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, as far as the pick and roll is concerned, and to be deadly coming off the bench. But he wants to start. Mm-hmm. He's made his declaration that he wants to start because he's playing for a new contract. It's just come to the point, will his aggressive talk and his aggressive nature be a detriment or a positive thing for the team? That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, that's always going to be kind of at the forefront of Lakers fans' minds, especially at the beginning of the season. That's something that you got to really interested with that. No, not really much of a training camp, not much, anything of an off season to speak of. Absolutely, there's going to be a lot of growing pains for that, for that cohesiveness and that chemistry. And then one of my other questions you kind of already touched on playoff Rondo. Of those big acquisitions, you also had a couple of losses, and we already kind of touched on those. But of those names that the Lakers lost, who do you think is kind of be maybe the biggest? Who's going to leave the biggest hole? Do you think?
Well, again, it's playoff Rondo being that playmaker, being that facilitator, and the fact that he was able to hit jump shots, which, as you know, is something that has eluded him for various points of his career. He was effective when we needed it the most for the team in the playoffs. Having that type of experience to go up and talk to younger players and be able to go ahead and give them the advice that they need. I see him as a very good coach once he finishes his career. And I think that's the biggest key. I think with the addition of Wesley Matthews, I think that offsets anything that you think you lost with Danny Green, because fading Danny Green, even though he could still play effective defense for you, so can Wesley Matthews. And I think he's a little bit better on the jump shot at this point in his career. And Montrezl Harrell, I think he's also another big question whether or not his style of play is going to mesh well. But I think when it comes down to in the playoffs, the Lakers still have the ingredient that helped get them. I mean, a lot of people were asking, where's the third man? You guys are terrible, very streaky at shooting. How are you guys going to actually go all the way? Well, we went all the way because our defense replaced a third man, and our defense replaced our streaky shooting and basically went ahead and provided us the impetus to go ahead and be able to get by and dominate most of these other teams and have a very good challenging series against the Heat and be able to come out on top of it. I think that the Lakers still having 6 of their top 7 defenders from that team last year is still a great sign that you can go 5 out and still be able to go ahead and still be effective on the defensive end. Now, if a team wants to go big, we can't go big right now, and that concerns me. But those are things that you can make changes on later on in the season, so I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of touching on that, with the Lakers coming off that championship and a short off season, what do you think they are? You said in Vegas already saying that there is the favorite of the Lakers being for the 2021 season. Do you think they will repeat, the Lakers?
Yes, I think they will repeat. I'm already on record. I had a season preview already with Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies that I did, and I am on the record saying that they are going to go all the way to the finals and be out on top. I mean, right now they're better on paper. If you're better on paper than you were last year and then the champions, I think at this point in time you should be able to repeat. The question is the team going to have that type of chemistry and bond like they had last year? And I think that's also necessary for them to go all the way. Just little things, little concerns I have. But then again, I think we're a lot better off than any other team right now. There's a lot less questions than there are in other places around the NBA.
Yeah, definitely. There's you've got this team kind of reloading, not really rebuilding. They're reloading at this point.
If LeBron and AD stay healthy, they're the best 1-2 in basketball. As simple as that.
Yeah, we saw that last year, and having those two now, especially with Anthony Davis getting that contract extension, re-signing, if you will, definitely a great chance, great starting point to have those two guys as 2 of your starters. Definitely puts you in a much better position. Kind of touching, and you mentioned already that if the Lakers are going to repeat, who potentially could be a team to watch out for in the West? Or who do you think could dethrone the Lakers as repeat champions?
Well, the team that I had picked in the NBA Finals to match up against them is the Brooklyn Nets. If they stay healthy, if they go ahead and find the mesh and chemistry within their team, they have the best team in the East, I think. They're ahead of Milwaukee because I think Milwaukee, even with the addition of Drew Holiday, still took a step back in its overall depth. I still think they don't have a great identity for the playoffs. I think when it comes right down to it, I kind of like Kyrie Irving and also Kevin Durant in a playoff matchup against any team in the East. The only team that they couldn't match up well against is the Los Angeles Lakers. But in the West, of course, the Clippers. The Clippers, I thought they were going to take a step back, but I think they're right where they were last year, especially with the addition of Ibaka. I really like that move for them. I really was hoping it would be for the Lakers that they would have gotten him. I think he was something that really was sorely needed that the Lakers would have enjoyed having, but worked out that the Clippers got him, and I think the Clippers are going to benefit from that. I think they are still going to be a strong number 2. I think if you don't think about Denver, you're kidding yourself. Denver, I think if Michael Porter Jr. reaches the kind of level that I think a lot of other people think that he's going to reach, and I think he's going to become a superstar at some point in time, I think that will be something that Denver is really going to be a strong team to go ahead and be up against in the playoffs. Utah, I think, is a lot of continuity right there for you. And I think with another year under their belts, I think they're ready to go ahead and take a next step. Dallas, if everybody goes ahead on that team and just helps out Luka, even to the smallest bit, Luka, I think, could have an MVP-like season going forward. In the East, there's a lot of good teams there. I mean, you're talking about, again, Milwaukee, who's got a very strong team, but still, are they set up for just the regular season? I think that's the major question. Philadelphia made a lot of changes on the board, and is that enough to go ahead and be competitive? I think so. I think they're going to be a very strong team in the East. You have Boston. Jason Tatum is a name to watch for the MVP race because I think a lot of people need to be very invested in what he has delivered. He's ready to take that next step. And I think also as well, you can't forget Miami. Miami didn't do a lot, but still, they may not have the best record overall during the season. But again, they're a team that's better suited for the playoffs, and I think they're going to have a good playoff run once again.
Absolutely. And, touching on some of those teams, the Celtics, Tatum kind of really expanding on that role, especially now Gordon Hayward moving on and really kind of doesn't logjam that lineup anymore of him coming back from an injury and guys not really knowing what kind of their role was, but now definitely seeing that expanded role. One of the teams I did want to ask you about in the West is a team that's kind of been down a lot over the last couple of years, but a lot of talent. The Phoenix Suns, and they added Chris Paul. Not to say they're going to challenge, but I guess that's in that division. Now you've got teams like you got the Lakers, Clippers, and the Suns now getting a lot better, and the Warriors. Obviously, Klay Thompson, that gruesome injury that he had yet again, unfortunately. But having Steph Curry come back and looks like he's getting his groove back in the preseason.
Curry looks great.
He does look great. I guess do you see any kind of major improvement from the rest of the Pacific Division? Because we've seen some shifts in the West and Houston kind of not knowing what's going on. They're kind of just reshuffling at this point. You see some other teams from the West maybe make a push for those playoff spots and knock some other teams out.
Well, with the Suns, I do see them sneaking into the playoffs, but Paul has to have another season like he did last year. He has to have a revitalized season again, like he did in Oklahoma City, I think, for the team to go forward. Booker is going to be a superstar, no question about it. We had this argument yesterday on our latest Lakers Fast Break about what level of superstardom do we think he can hit. I think the kid's going to be a superstar here in 2-3 years. That year could be now. I think he's ready to take that next step as well. But I think there's a lot of youth on that team. So I think that's going to prevent them from being in the upper echelon of the West. But I still see them somewhere in the playoff mix. With Golden State, Curry has to play again at an MVP-like level for them to go ahead and be in that mix. And right now, he looks like he's ready to do that. I think you're going to get one last great run. But who knows what Draymond Green will give you? Is he washed? Is he not? I mean, last year he looked washed, but then again, the whole team did. So maybe it was just because he didn't want to give the effort. So we'll see what he has still left in the tank. But that team has some obvious issues, like you said, with Klay Thompson being out of the lineup and his future being somewhat in peril. I mean, those teams are probably in the West look like maybe strong contenders for some playoff spots. And the Rockets, it all depends on if they want to keep James Harden. If they have James Harden, they have a team that's definitely worthy of the playoffs in that mix because DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall, they look pretty good. I don't know if they look like 100% themselves, but they certainly look like a lot better than what people were expecting. So I think that they could definitely be in the playoff mix as well. But it's all up to health. It's all up continued, I guess, chemistry. And then also as well, can these players that have to hold on and have a team climb on their back, can that player lift them up? Like the Lucas, like the Steph Currys, like what we were talking about with Devin Booker, like what we were talking about with Jason Tatum. All these teams that are now going to be focused with one superstar primarily, can these teams go ahead and ride their back all the way up to a high playoff spot?
Absolutely. It's definitely going to be a lot of fun to watch this upcoming NBA season. It is right around the corner this coming week. Definitely excited. I know Christmas is about to come a little bit early for us. Fantastic. Let's kind of chat a little bit about some of the things that you have coming up on Lakers Fast Break in the near future.
Well, absolutely. I'm going to be finishing this weekend the last of our 3 retrospectives on the Lakers championship winning season. Basically, their Lakers championship rewinds, part 1 and part 2 are already up on the Lakers Fast Break channel already. They were look backs with segments from some of the best episodes we did during the course of the 2019-2020 season, with all the highs and lows, where we started off with the trouble in China and the early success of the team, to the second episode where we covered the tragic death of Kobe and the fight for racial, justice, and obviously the spread of COVID when that first hit. So we talked about that. We had interviews going on that. And now part 3, we're obviously going to go ahead and talk about the bubble, what happened in the bubble, and then the ultimate championship for the Lakers. So that'll be coming up here. Plus, we will, again, like I said, over the course of the next few days, try to cover as many games as we can with post-game reports and post-game shows. And then also I'm going to have great guests hopefully on with you in the not too distant future as well. And also many other guests over the course of the season right here at the Lakers Fast Break.
Absolutely. Had a lot of fun joining your show last time, and always a lot of fun talking basketball with you.
Yes, I enjoyed it as well. I look forward to our next conversation there.
Yeah, it's always gonna be a lot of fun. I'm excited. But it's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Let's talk a little bit real quick, kind of close out the show, of telling everybody once again kind of where we can find the Lakers Fast Break podcast and when to expect the next things from you.
Absolutely. I truly appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak here. Again, if you just type in Lakers Fast Break, of course, you'll get the obligatory shots of Magic Johnson during the 80s heyday, but you'll also see where everything is being done at Lakers Fast Break on Twitter, Lakers Fast Break on Facebook, and of course, Lakers Fast Break wherever you get your podcasts. I will be having a lot of great episodes coming up here in the next few days, few weeks, because the Lakers season is going to start. You can't stop now. So you're going to have to have a lot of great episodes coming up. So we are looking forward to a big season ahead. Hopefully another championship season for the Lakers going forward right here at the Lakers Fast Break. You can always catch it wherever you get your podcasts, or you can see our regular episodes, our videos that I do, the live videos that I do on Facebook, Lakers Fast Break, YouTube, Lakers Fast Break, or also as well, they're also embedded into stories and also posts on Lakerholics.com as well.
Absolutely. Well, Gerald, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, check out the Lakers Fast Break podcast at Lakers Fast Break on Facebook and on Twitter, and of course, YouTube and anywhere that you get your podcasts. Again, thank you so much, Gerald. We'll look forward to having talking on the Lakers Fast Break again very soon.
Yes. Come on down, man. The invitation's there. I'm going to put out the red carpet. I'm actually going to go ahead and get a vacuum. I'm going to vacuum maybe any lint that's on there and go ahead and make sure that it's all nice and ready when you come back on the show one more time.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. We'll have a lot of fun. My name is Craig Campbell with Final Score on Podcast City Network. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a good night.
Podcast City Network.